Let's pray for a moment. May the words of my mouth, the meditation of my heart, be acceptable to you, God, my rock and my salvation. So we pray, Lord, speak to us, either through me or in spite of me, but open our hearts to hear the living words of God. Amen. My very first recollection of the inside of a church was in the Reformed church near our house, in the town where I grew up in. And the church made a whole life impression on me. I cannot forget that. I can still remember the silence when we entered the church. In those days, you did not speak when you go into church. And we had these wooden pews. It cracked when you sat down. So I remember that. I remember the door of the clock tower open, and the guy go in and he would ring the bell for the start of the sermon or the start of the service. And then, of course, when he rings the bell and the church service starts, the pastor and the whole church council would enter the church from behind, and he would go up on the pulpit. And then I remember his words, the first words always used every service. I remember that as a young child. It's the very first text verse I've ever learned. And it was the words of Psalm 121. He always prayed it. He says, I lift my eyes to the mountains. From whence shall my help come? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. So he prayed it every time. And then there was this wise little kid who asked his mom one day after church. He said to his mom, well, Pastor is praying this prayer every time. Where shall my help come from? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. And he asked his mom, now, why don't God answer his prayers? Because it seems as if he has a bit of a struggle there every time. I love the Psalms. It was Athanasius that said, the Psalms has a special place in the Bible because the Psalms speak to us. Not only does it speak to us, it speaks for us. And I want to add, I think the Psalms speak with us. The Psalms, we cannot read the Psalms like any other literature. They are poems, they are songs. But those are the songs that we can get into. We can clothe ourselves with these Psalms and we can pray them. We can lament with them. We can cry with them. We can sing with them. The Psalms speak with us to God. And that's why we need to hear the Psalms very well. There are a few things that we might want to know when we read the Psalms and when we try to let the Psalms speak with us. First is certainly that the Psalms are the prayers of the people and also the prayers of God for the people. We know that the Psalms are divided in 5 books. And then there's a scholar with the name of Klaus Westermann, and he proposes that the Psalms not be read as single units. So you don't read Psalm 1 on its own and then go to Psalm 2. He says the Psalms are clusters, so we have to read them in clusters. One such a big cluster is Psalms 120 to 134, and those are the Psalms of ascent, or the traveling Psalms. But Westermann goes further. He says, well, that's a big cluster, but we need to look at smaller clusters. So, in other words, you try to read the Psalms without the numbering. And he then proposes that Psalm 120 to Psalm 123 is one such a cluster. So if you start reading Psalm 120 right through to 123 without the headings or without the numbers, the picture that emerges is a bit different than when you read it just one by one. And then he proposes another thing. He says that we have to look at the Psalms in its context and its time context when it was written. That's not always very easy to find that one out. They talk about the Sitz in Leben, the living situation when the psalm is formed, when the psalm was written. With that in mind, let's look at Psalm 121. And for me, this is my favorite psalm. I love Psalm 121. I read it so many times. I preached about it so many times. And every time I look at it, something new arises. Let's look at that. The scholars tell us that this psalm was written after the exile. So imagine yourself, if we had to join them, we are part of a group of people, faithful people, going up to Jerusalem on the dusty roads of Palestine, of Israel. And while we go up to one of the festivals, we sing. And we sing these psalms of joy and the psalms of longing. We sing about our past, we sing about our present, we sing about our future. We complain, we lament, we praise, and we hope. And then when we look at this psalm, Psalm 121, we look at people who want to focus. Psalm 120 to 123, the central idea there is, where is your focus? Where do you look at? What is filling your eyes and your mind? Psalm 121 asks the big question, the big what? Psalm 120 ends with these words, I am a man of peace, but when I speak, therefore war. And then directly, I lift mine eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? At first, this question, this lament, and then he says, well, we need help. We need help. Imagine the pilgrims. Imagine the exile, people back from exile. They're walking up to Jerusalem, and around them they see ruins. They see destructions. Imagine, maybe we can turn it to Korea. Think of after the war, the 1950, 51, 52 war. Think of what Korea must have looked like that time. Think of what went through people's minds when they walked through the ruins and they're desperately looking for hope. And then you can maybe relate to what happened and what went through these people's minds when they walked through those lands of hope and villages destroyed. And they sing these songs and they know we need help. Today we start Chuseok, Thanksgiving. And maybe you ask the question, what am I thankful for? And I asked myself this question yesterday, and I asked a friend, and I asked people around me, what are you thankful for? If I can say what I'm thankful for is that I know God has helped me so many times during this year, that God was so visible in my life through help. Many times I cried unto the Lord, and the Lord helped me. And that's why this is the focus of this psalm. Where to get help from? We all need help. So they walked there and they sang the song, I lift my eyes to the mountains. From whence shall my help come? We need to understand something about this verse. It's a very interesting verse. Remember, they walked there, and it's not only the Israelites, it's not only the small remnant, but they are being checked. There are people around lining the streets where they walk, because it's something exciting, this group of people walking and singing in this march to Jerusalem. So the heathen, the native people of the land, they're standing there and they listen to these songs. Now this verse, this first part, is reckoned as a mocking psalm. Many times in the Psalms you'll find there's an element of mocking. So what are they saying actually? They sang the song, they say, I lift my eyes to the mountains. Where shall my help come from? And so the people around them were listening to them. You see, the people around them, their gods lived on mountains. Every mountain had its own god. And these gods were competing with one another, and they were always in some kind of conflict with one another. So this song goes on and said, I lift my eyes to the hills. Where shall my help come from? And then the thunderous reply, my help is from the Lord who made the heaven and the earth. Wow. They actually mock the bystanders. They say to them, well, you might get your help from these mountain gods, but do you know who is our help, who is our God? The one who made the mountains, who made this earth. Wow. That's something new. That's something exciting. That builds hope. That builds faith. Where's your help from? Where's my help from? Maybe we sometimes, like these bystanders, we look not too high. We look at the mountains, the possibles. We think in terms of possibilities. And we have a problem thinking of the impossibilities, because the people around them, if you look at the mountain, that's easy. The gods on the mountains, well, they had quite a time competing with one another. They had quite a time because they also slept. You find that in 1 Kings, where Elijah met with the prophets of Baal. And he also mocked them. Maybe your gods are asleep. And it was very common that time to think of their gods in very human terms. So their gods slept. Their gods were busy with so many things that they had to arouse their attention, and they had to do something to get their attention. So these Israelites, they mock them. You look at the mountains. We look higher up because our God made the mountains and the earth. Then he goes on. He says, our help comes from the Lord. The word help is very interesting. The word help in the Septuagint, it's translated with the word botheia, from there to botheia, and it's a very interesting word. The word botheia is a word that is used by people who are in the boat business. It's a nautical word. So the word is actually used, what we read in Acts today. After they hoisted the lifeboat up, they used supporting cables, the botheia, that is the supporting cables, in undergirding the ship. And fearing that they might run aground on the shallows of Cyprus, they laid down the sea anchor. That's what we read. So what is happening? The Bethea is undergirding, it is strengthening the whole of the ship so that it doesn't break. That's all. You see, Bethea actually means to keep intact, that you don't fall apart. And in this sense, they talk about God, where shall our Bethea come from? And they say it is from the Lord. We don't need these cables because the arms of God is our Bethea. God holds us together. God holds me together that I don't fall apart. In the text, you get a progression. Our help is from the Lord. And then he says, he is our help, he is our keeper, he is our protector. Now the question, how will he do that? How will God help me? How will God put his arms around me? What is the sense of this protection, this help? He says, well, he is the one who made the heaven and the earth. He is the one who will not allow your foot to slip. He who keeps you will not slumber. Behold, he who keeps Israel will never slumber nor sleep. He is the one that is the shadow on my right hand. In Israel, those days, they did not have beautiful high roads. It was these very narrow little paths, dusty roads along very high cliffs. And if your foot slipped, well, you're done. And it's always a fear if you travel somewhere, especially when it becomes dark, that you might slip and fall. And they express their fears and they say, well, this Lord will hold you and he will steer you. Isn't that fantastic? God not only holds me, but God's steering me. And God is more, he's the shadow on my right hand, my strong hand. He holds my hand. Moreover, he cannot sleep. He cannot even take a nap. And they mock these others. Our God is always awake, always alert. He's up all night anyway. He will keep you. He will be the one that enfolds you. So, what can we say about all of this? Where is your focus? Where's the focus of your life, my life? Is it on the mountains? Is it the possibles? Or do we have the courage to sing as these pilgrims sung, and we say, our help is from the Lord? Very interesting. If you go to the Hebrew, the Lord, the name for the Lord was translated as Yahweh or Jehovah, but Yahweh is the right translation. The reason for Yahweh is because your tongue doesn't touch any part of your inner mouth. You don't express these consonants like we do in English. So if you mention the name Yahweh, it's not like I did now. It's actually Yahweh. It's a breath. Yahweh. Why am I saying this? This is the God who is so close to you, that he is so close as even the breath that you have in you. You breathe him in, you breathe him out. He's the life that is given to you. He says, God is so close. There's help. It's not far. It's so close. It's your way. So close. He's our help. So what? Don't look back, as Lot's wife did. Don't look within, as we sometimes do so much. Don't look around, as David did, but look up. He will keep your head from swimming, your heart from sinking, your knees from trembling, your feet from slipping, your hands from hanging down. So are you discouraged? Look up, and your youth shall be renewed as like the eagles. Are you desponding? Look up, for Jesus never breaks the bruised seed. Do you look too much at your own self? Turn your eyes upon Jesus. He will bind the broken heart. Do not look at your sin, it will discourage you. Deal with it. Do not look at yourself, it will distress you. Do not look at Satan, he will bewilder you. Do not look at men, they will deceive and disappoint you. Do not look at your trials, they will deject you. Look at God. My help comes from the Lord, who made the heavens and the earth. Corrie ten Boom said, look around and be discouraged. Look inside and be depressed. Look at Jesus and be at rest. Amen.